and welcome back to my little corner on the internet. It's been a hot second, but I've scheduled my time a bit better. So today I want to make a video just discussing a little bit of everything I've read semi-recently, what I'm currently reading, and my sort of reading plans for the foreseeable future. Because believe it or not, I did enter a reading slump and I'm slowly leaving it right now. I am going back to all the books that I have read in February and March, because March I haven't really completed that many yet, and also because I didn't make a video discussing everything I read in February. Here's what the stack is looking like from I've recently read. I know people are looking at this because I know lots of people were wondering what I thought about it because I finished it the other day. We're gonna start off with Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson, which is a book that I have mentioned before for a different video, but I absolutely loved this book. I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. But essentially, if you enjoy books filled with love, romance, inner reflections on identity, and I guess the poeticness of human relation and connection, this is the book for you. It follows this unnamed protagonist and her embarking on this journey with an affair with a married woman, and it follows their connection and all the ups and downs and intricacies of dealing with that and the husband, whilst also dealing with a sort of twist that kind of creates this sort of sense of impending, not doom, but it creates this sort of idea of a conclusion, but it doesn't fully get there, if that makes sense. It's a very beautiful, very well written book. It's quite poetic. Whoa, the lighting change is crazy right now. Anyways, what was I saying? It's very well written, it's very poetic in its prose, and it does require you to pay some close attention because it is a bit more, I guess, less direct in what it's trying to convey at times, which I find is really fun because it gives you space to sort of interpret things and kind of really train your brain to read subtext and such. I really loved this book. And if you're interested in, I guess, getting into the idea of romance books, but you don't like the current scene of contemporary romance, but you want something that is romantic and surrounds itself around love, this is a good book. Very good book. Next is Wind/Pinball by Haruki Murakami. This book is 2 books in one. I think this was one of his first novels, if I'm thinking right. I could be wrong, I don't remember. I read these 2 because I really wanted to read Pinball 1973 because a good friend of mine is in a band and they named themselves Pinball 1973 after the book. So I thought I need to read it, and I did. It was okay. I think I gave it 3 stars out of 5 for each of the books. It's just very mundane. It basically just follows the life of someone in their 20s and their relationships and experiences with, you know, messing around, contemporary life. Pinball follows more the narrator's friend, the rat. And surprisingly enough, pinballs don't really come into play until more towards the end of the book, which I found odd. But I don't know, it's a very light, easy read, and it was kind of funny and silly at times. And I do enjoy reading unlikable characters because the characters are quite unlikable, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm sure Murakami has better novels than this. But it was a solid, easy read to fill my time. It was an interesting insight into his writing style and his tone. I understand why people critique him a lot when it comes to writing female characters because, damn, he loves describing boobs. I cannot lie. He loves doing that. Anyways, that was that. I think, would I necessarily tell people to like go and read it? Probably not. I think unless someone really asked me for something easy and simple to read to get through very fast, sure, that's a good book, but if I were to recommend Murakami, I would want to read his other works first. Next, Homesick for Another World by Ottessa Moshfegh. I love Ottessa Moshfegh. I'm pretty sure I've now read every single one of her books except for McGlue, which is like a little novella. So I have to get to that, and then I have officially completed my Moshfegh readings. But this is a short story collection, which I actually quite enjoyed. I think I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I believe it's a great introduction into Moshfegh's writing, the sort of themes and styles that she tends to dive into. It is quite an absurd collection of short stories. They can get quite dark and gross and weird, and what I liked about it is that because this was published before many of her major works like My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Death in Her Hands, I did pick up on a couple of the little things that were very reminiscent of those novels, which I quite liked. I guess she's not afraid to write about intrusive thoughts and being very raw and honest, and at times I guess problematic in some ways. Not problematic as in like politically incorrect, but just, you know, she's not afraid to speak her mind and write things difficult to digest, if that makes sense. I really liked this. I blasted through it. And I think the title Homesick for Another World is very much reflective of the nature of all these short stories. There is this sort of underlying longing for something else and something more from all these characters. Yes, if you want a short story collection that's very contemporary and slightly dark at times, but also very entertaining to read, I recommend this very much. Especially if you want to get into Moshfegh's writings. I think that is a great place to start off before you dive into any of her more popular works. Next is Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre, if I'm saying that correctly. But I'm not sure if I've discussed this book yet. I gave this 5 stars. It's a masterpiece. People talk about this and hype this up as a great modern classic for a reason, and I completely agree with it. It is so good, and it follows this writer who basically narrates in a sort of journal entry-esque way, and it's him grappling with the idea of freedom and his free will, and I guess dissecting the meaninglessness of the world. It is an existential novel. He was very big on existentialism as a framework of thinking, and this has done a wonderful job of, I guess, exploring that side of thinking, and I just loved it. It was brilliant. His writing is beautiful, amazing. Absolutely loved it. I have quite a few tabs in here. I want to see if I can find a little excerpt that I annotated to give you a little taste, because I do highly recommend this. It's probably become one of my favorites, and I do want to read it again. I'll read this little entry that I underlined quite early on in the book, so no spoiling or anything. It's odd. I have just filled up 10 pages and I haven't told the truth, at least not the whole truth. When I wrote under the date Nothing New, it was with a bad conscience. As a matter of fact, there was a little incident with nothing shameful or extraordinary about it, which refused to come out. Nothing new. I admire the way we can lie, putting reason on our side. And that is basically a glimpse into that whole idea of life doesn't necessarily have any meaning, but you can assign meaning to it. Everything's meaningless unless you assign it meaning yourself. Because we live in a postmodern world. You live and exist in your own subjective reality. And so you can essentially dictate what has meaning and what doesn't, because everyone is existing in their own timeline, if that makes sense, which I really like. I think when I started getting into existentialism and absurdism and this idea of conducting your life in a way that I guess you can decide what has purpose and what doesn't, there is no greater purpose that befalls upon everyone as a collective, but rather existing as an individual in your own reality, has made things a bit more peaceful rather than chasing something that we all agree with, if that makes sense. Sorry, I got off into a tangent there for a bit. Anyways, next is Nothing New by Nicole Flattery. Again, if you haven't seen other videos, this follows this 17-year-old, if I am not mistaken, who leaves home, drops out, and goes to New York and gets a job transcribing audio files for Andy Warhol. And it follows her life in the sort of 60s, if I'm not mistaken. The 60s era in New York, transcribing these audio files, and her trying to sort her life out, trying to understand what she wants out of life and where she wants to take herself. There's lots of focus on her and her friendship with this other woman who's also transcribing these files. And I thought it was such a fun and interesting read. I've seen people not enjoy it too much and they didn't get much out of it, but I found it very refreshing to read a contemporary novel that still is set in the sort of pre-tech era. So the characters seem very perceptive, and the sort of environment of the 60s in New York is such an interesting thing to read about. And just seeing how she develops as a character and how she navigates life and how she interprets people and the world around her as a 17-year-old is so fun. And having that sort of set against Andy Warhol era, all of that is just very fun. And I picked this up after I read Andy Warhol's philosophy autobiography thing. And yeah, I had lots of fun with this. Finally, another thing I recently read, which I think many people are waiting for, my verdict on, is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I liked this book. I thought it was very well done, very well written. It falls into the sort of dark academia genre, which has grown in popularity these last few years, I would say. And so I thought I must read this so I can provide my insight. When I first picked this up, I got hooked on it very quickly. I thought she did quite a good job at getting you hooked and interested in these characters and this sort of plot line and getting us and setting us within this environment of Oxford University, the translation studies. I thought that her use of referring to language as this sort of language and education as a form of power, and how so much of translation and language and how much meaning and interpretation is lost within that sort of liminal space, how fluid it all can be, which I really liked. I think it's really cool. I love languages, you know? And I thought that the way that she interpolated both the plot of exploring morals and the impacts of colonialism within the education system and power structures was really well done. And I guess how she built up the characters and how she also incorporated their relationships and how that interplays with their experience as students was also very, very entertaining and very well done. I did feel though that sometimes when she would get into sort of more discursive writings on that whole thing surrounding war and colonialism, sometimes the way she wrote it took me out of the reality that we are reading, if that makes sense. It felt that, you know, we were kind of taking a break all of a sudden and she would dissect these things, which she dissected it well, and you can really sense this sort of new tone shift towards this, which I really appreciated. She provides a sort of new light into these sort of things, but it did kind of interrupt the suspension of reality of the book, because there are some, I guess, would it be sci-fi elements? Magical realism, but that did kind of take me out at times. And the book can get quite dark because it deals with so much pain and suffering of minority groups, which, you know, it is important to, I guess, point out and bring light. And being such a huge book, it's great that people picking that up and reading about that, but centralizing so much of it with pain was kind of hard to read at times, which I know it's a difficult topic and I acknowledge that, but like it gets to a point where it's so much castration that it just like, it's not just that comes with that. Are y'all picking up what I'm saying? But anyways, and then eventually towards the end was when I was kind of getting tired of it a bit. I feel like the story plateaued a bit and I was having trouble with getting through it, unfortunately, just because it became very stagnant and I wasn't sure where the story was going to go, with what's going to happen now then. And I was a bit taken out and I just kind of wasn't picking it up as much, unfortunately. But eventually I just pushed through the last few pages and I was content with how it finalized. But yeah, I thought it was really good. Will I read it again? Maybe in the future. I did have quite a few tabs coming in at the beginning, but then I slowly sort of dipped off because I wasn't picking up so much on things to dissect myself. That's my verdict on Babel. I think it's very much deserving to be within that popular dark academia genre. I understand the hype now. These are then my recently read books and all my little thoughts on them. Now, what I am currently reading. I'm trying to keep my reading pile shorter and less overwhelming, especially because I have a lot of uni work going on too. But currently reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I think I've mentioned this. I'm close to halfway. And I'm really, really, really liking it. I love Dostoevsky's writing. I think he's so great. Raskolnikov, I get you. Weirdly enough, I think that I was flying through The Brothers Karamazov much faster than I was flying through this. and I was much more engaged with that book, weirdly enough, because it's like a 1,000-page book. I'm really liking it so far. I recently, aka last night, I picked up Kudos by Rachel Cusk, which is the third book from her trilogy series, and this is the one thing that is pulling me out of my slump right now. I picked it up last night. I am halfway. I will probably read a huge chunk of it later today and tonight. I absolutely love Cusk's writing. There's something about the way that she writes and what she writes about that is so on par with my thinking and the sort of thinking that I have in my brain that I struggle to formulate into full sentences and coherent ideas. And this just relieves that tension in my brain. So, thank you, Rachel Cusk. Thank you so much. If you enjoy contemporary literature that touches a lot on questions on life and I guess philosophical thinking, Rachel Cusk in general is a great writer for that. This trilogy series has been amazing. I absolutely love her. And then also I've been reading my Philosophy Now magazine. This edition, which is the February-March issue for the year, is lots on political philosophy. As you can see, Machiavelli at the front. But yeah, I'm really liking it. There's some really interesting articles. No, they're not articles, right? But the different pieces of writing in this are very, very interesting. And I'm really liking it. So that's a fun read to have every once in a while. I don't want anything too long or crazy. I just want a quick read. That magazine has been perfect. And lastly, here are some books that I would like to read this next month or so, or I've been itching to read for a while, and now that I'm getting out of my slump, I feel it's time that I pick them up. One book that I've been eyeing and I've been looking at my shelf for ages, but I've just been telling myself I want to finish this stack of reading first before I get into it, blah blah blah, is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbach, which is a translated novel from German, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think it's translated from German. Found this, where did I see this? I think I saw this book on Pinterest. I don't know, the cover caught my attention and I thought, interesting. And then I looked it up on Goodreads and I saw that it won the International Booker Prize for last year, and the premise seemed right up my alley and I thought I need to get this. So I'll read you the blurb so you can get an idea. Berlin, 11th July 1986. They meet by chance on a bus. She is a young student, he is older and married. Theirs is an intense and sudden attraction fueled by a shared passion for music and art and heightened by the secrecy they must maintain. But when she betrays him with a colleague, the relationship takes a darker turn, just as the GDR begins to crumble, ushering in a new era whose great gains also involve profound loss. It just seems perfect. I'm very, very, very excited to read this, and I've been wanting to read it for so long, so I think I'm going to finally pick it up and do it. So that's one. The next is also something I've been wanting to read, and I've been in a mood to read Joan Didion, and so I want to pick up Slouching Towards Bethlehem, and this is a essay collection focusing on her younger self, New York, I guess contemporary lifestyle back in that era, and she touches a lot on pop culture and Hollywood and that sort of industry as well, which I really enjoyed in her writings. I've only heard good things about this collection. I've read The White Album and Play As It Lays. I've read those two and I love her writing. If you haven't watched her documentary film on Netflix, The Center That Will Not Hold, I think it's called, that is a great film if you want to learn a bit more about Joan. I really want to read this, and also because I want something a bit more nonfiction just to have on the side while I read lots of fiction. It's a good balance to have. And finally, something that I recently got is An Apprenticeship or the Book of Pleasures by Clarice Lispector. I really enjoy Lispector's writing. I read Agua Viva and absolutely loved that book. Changed my brain chemistry. And I was browsing a little bookstore and I saw this and I thought, it's a short book. I need something short and quick to read to get me out of my slump. And so I grabbed this. I have another book by Lispector, but it's very thick. I think it's The Apple in the Dark. Yeah, I have The Apple in the Dark, but it's a bit of a thicker book. And I'm afraid that won't help me get out of this. So I got this. The little blurb for you if you're interested. Lottie yearns for love yet is scared of herself and of connecting with another human. When she meets Ulysses, a professor of philosophy, she is forced to confront her fears as both of them will learn to be worthy of another person. They must first be fully themselves. The book of which Clarice Lispector said, I humanized myself. It is the ultimate unknowability of one other in a relationship and what it means to love and be loved. Y'all, I need this. I need to read this because I unfortunately am the type to spiral very quickly when it comes to forming relations with new people. We're not gonna get into that, not today. Those were all my recent books, my recent reads, my current reads, and my soon to be read, hopefully. And if you have any thoughts on the books that I recently read or anything that you would like to rebuttal with, I don't know, anything, just feel free to comment. I will try my best to respond. I don't have much else to say, but yeah, I will see y'all when I see y'all. And thank you all for the love. Have a beautiful, a magical, a wonderful day, month, week, year, whatever it is.